He had just barely accumulated enough that he could buy his first Burger King franchise. Now, according to the administration and the powers that be in Congress, he's rich. He's a sub-S corp, like a lot of small business people, so the business income is reported on his personal return. And since he's rich, he's supposed to spread the wealth around and share and so on. Let me tell you what being rich meant for him. For the first 2 years, he worked 70 hours a week, every day of the year. No holidays, no Thanksgiving, no Christmas, no New Year's. He worked hard. Not just doing payroll, not just doing paperwork, not just sitting in an office. He was the guy on his hands and knees scraping the gum off the underside of the tables because his margins were thin and he couldn't hire people to do everything. So he had to do it himself. He was the guy whose family was there doing the deep cleaning. He was the guy who had to worry about, can we continue to afford to give English lessons to the staff, or are we going to have to cancel that so we've got enough money to hire a security guard because it looks like there's drug deals going down in the parking lot? It's no picnic, being a small business person. But he worked hard, and he saved, and he prospered, and after a couple of years, he was able to get his second franchise, and kept it up, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. And he did finally take a family vacation 5 years into it. So now he has 5 Burger Kings. He employs over 80 full-time people. Historically, small business has accounted for 70% of the net new job creation in this country. And for younger workers or lower skilled workers, a job at someplace like Burger King is likely to be the first rung on the economic ladder. So we want the John Mascalli's of the world to be hiring. But John doesn't dare bring on new employees now. He has accumulated the capital necessary to expand, but he doesn't dare open new restaurants now. Why? Well, because every time he turns around, he's being kicked by Washington, being told that his wealth is somehow the result of greed or unfair advantage, and being given policies that guarantee that he will keep less of what he works hard to earn, and that if he employs somebody, it will be a much more expensive and risky proposition for him. John understands that that so-called stimulus hasn't stimulated anything but federal spending. It certainly hasn't stimulated employment. Remember the promises that it was going to create or save 3.5 million jobs? Well, we've lost 3.2 million instead, 700,000 of them in manufacturing. John understands that the government has borrowed trillions of dollars it does not have to spend on programs it can't afford, and somebody's going to have to pay the tab, and it's likely to be people like him. So naturally, he's behaving pretty cautiously with his hard-earned money. Likewise, Congress, in its infinite wisdom, decided to pass a cap-and-trade law. This massive new national energy tax and regulatory scheme. My former employer, the Heritage Foundation, estimates that it will cost the average household over $3,000 a year indefinitely in higher energy costs and related expenses. That is real money. For an energy-intensive small business, the cost will be even greater. Burger Kings use a lot of electricity. John doesn't know how much his cost of business is going to go up, but he knows it's going up. So it makes him cautious. Obamacare. John does his best to provide good benefits for his employees. But now the federal government says if he doesn't spend enough on health insurance for them, he will have to pay a hefty penalty to the feds. And John wants to take good care of his employees, but he can't just jack the price of a Whopper up to cover all the new costs that are coming out of Washington. So John isn't hiring. John isn't expanding. In fact, when people leave, he's trying his best not to replace them. Not because he doesn't want to hire, he does. But because bringing on new employees now has become an awfully risky endeavor for a small businessman who operates on thin margins. And so when a cashier leaves, John's looking at these new machines that are kind of like ATMs. You punch in your own order, then swipe your own credit card, I see some nods. Some of you have seen those. Well, if John isn't hiring, and you look at all the John Mascallies around the country who are in a similar situation, is it any wonder that the economy has stagnated? Now let's go to the other end of the economic spectrum. Another supporter of ours had a client who wanted to put a new silicon wafer fabrication plant down in the Santa Clara County portion of the district. It's been a long time since anywhere near Silicon Valley a new silicon wafer fab plant was put in. They're expensive. I mean, it's about a $2 billion capital investment. They really wanted to put it here in California. They wanted to keep it here where they lived. You know, they wanted to be able to have headquarters and the plant close together. But there are costs. So they compared sites in Arizona and in Texas and a couple overseas, including one in China. Guess where the plant ended up going? China. Guess why? Over the life cycle of the plant, it was $8 billion more expensive to put it in Silicon Valley than in China. Now that's not just a coincidence. Once again, it is the result of federal policy. Do you realize that only 4% of the cost differential was attributable to labor? The majority of the cost differential was accounted for by taxation. The United States has the highest effective corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. It's the second highest nominally, the highest as applied. Communist China is literally more hospitable to investment and income than the United States of America. Now, doesn't that tell you that something has gone profoundly wrong in Washington? The very people who accuse Republicans of wanting to ship jobs overseas are the ones who are also advocating even higher taxation and costs on those who do the hiring here. So you don't have to look far to see that our country has really gotten on the wrong track. People are hurting, the economy is stagnant, and it is not a coincidence. It is the result of bad policy. And unfortunately, the incumbent congressman in this district has rubber-stamped every bad policy that has come through the Obama-Pelosi agenda. TARP, the bailouts, rubber-stamped it, yes. The so-called stimulus, which hasn't stimulated anything but deficit spending and debt, rubber-stamped it, yes. The cap-and-trade legislation that threatens to raise energy costs so dramatically, rubber-stamped it, yes. Obamacare, this trillion-dollar government health care takeover, rubber-stamped it, yes. Now, you should vote for the person who reflects your views and values. That's his record. And the reason he's in trouble, the reason he is afraid to accept our invitation to attend town hall forums like this one, and visit with people, is that he cannot defend his record, because his record constitutes an assault on the working men and women of his own district. Now, someone said that the definition of insanity is what? Exactly. You do the same thing over and over and expect it to turn out different. We can change the way the economy is performing. But to do that, we got to change the policies that govern the economy. And to do that, we got to change the people making the policies. Ultimately, that's what this election is about. If you are happy with the status quo, if you think things are going fine the way they are, if you think San Joaquin County is fat and happy, and the country's doing just as well as it possibly could, there is no reason to make a change. But if you remember how good things were, and you want that hope and opportunity for the next generation, we can't keep sending the same people back there, can we? So that's what this is about. That's what this is about in the end. Now that rant went way longer than I expected to. Frank, did I leave some time for questions here?
Yeah, we got plenty of time for questions.
Thanks for your patience.
Thomas Whitten.